I am Christine Tulley, President of Defend and Publish and Executive Writing Coach. Welcome to episode 66, Final Push Dissertation, the Writing. In this episode, we're going to talk through 4 techniques that can help you determine what writing you should be doing on your dissertation as you're moving towards completion and what things you can avoid. If you have not listened to the previous episode, that one would have been episode 65. That one was all about taking stock of your dissertation progress and determining when you can actually complete and finish your dissertation defense and graduate. So that would be a helpful episode to listen to before listening to this one. But today what we're going to talk about, and this is just the first of several episodes about doing a final push towards completing your dissertation. But this first episode is going to give you 4 practical strategies to figure out what it is you're supposed to be doing with your writing that will have more of an impact than some other strategies. Next week, we'll talk about some of the more nitpicky things that you can be doing. So these are the strategies that I would recommend. One of the things that I would recommend is strategy 1, make sure that you know what you are actually arguing. What is the overall argument that this dissertation makes? You may have written an abstract a long time ago for this project. This would be the time to revisit that and make sure that you know what this project is arguing and contributing to your discipline. Another place to look would be in your introduction. You might figure out, okay, well, when I first wrote this introductory chapter, this is what I thought I was doing, but now this is what my project actually does. That's another spot to look and fine tune. Another way that you could think about this is, how are you going to talk about this project? Many of you have probably already gone out on job interviews for different positions, and you had to say, here's what my dissertation is about. Essentially, you're capturing, why is this project important? That's not the same thing as, what is the project itself actually arguing? One of the things that you can do to make sure you know what your argument is to check out episode 40 in our podcast series, which was about posting your thesis on the wall. This episode basically talked about distilling your argument down to a sentence or two and putting it somewhere where you can see it all the time. The reason this is important, especially now at the point where you're getting ready for a dissertation defense, getting ready to graduate, is that it's very easy to lose sight of whatever that singular goal is. And at this point in time, you probably have to make choices for how you're going to use what's remaining of the time you have left. So now would not be the time to try to argue, some different nuances or to add something to your argument. And having that clear argument in front of you all the time, front and center, on a Post-it, on your wall, anywhere where you have it, can be the tool that you use to determine, should I work on this one thing or should I work on something else? Because any of the things that you are doing that do not feed towards that argument might be unnecessary at this point, and you might not have time for them. There's certainly going to be tasks that you have to do that don't have anything to do with your argument. For example, formatting your dissertation according to your university's guidelines. But that aside, there probably are some things that you could do if you had the room. For example, the urge to work in one more source. At this point, if it's one you're not using and there is absolutely no reason to stick it in there that doesn't work towards that singular goal of clarifying your argument, I would leave it out. You don't have the time to put it in. So that would be one that you could look at. Another episode that might be helpful is episode 46. So a second strategy that I would recommend is making a master list of everything that you need to do to complete this dissertation. Last week, I suggested that as a strategy where I said that you might find with your dissertation advisor in a conversation that there are 4 things that absolutely have to happen to make your project a go, to make sure that you can have a defense scheduled and that you have a reasonably good shot at passing it and graduating. Here, having a list of everything that needs to be done is not the same. It's certainly going to incorporate those 4 things, but those 4 things or 3 things or whatever your advisor suggested to you are probably set to you in very broad strokes, but not specifically how you're actually going to execute them. So for example, maybe a comment from a dissertation advisor, and this is something that I see a lot, is that many dissertation advisors feel that the implications of your project have not been fleshed out enough. You have not really explained the implications. Well, that's a broad stroke thing you have to do with your project, but that doesn't say how you might do that. So one of the ways that you might do that, if we think about a concrete writing strategy, is, I would argue, taking a look at that Manchester academic phrase bank. I know I talk about it all the time on this podcast because I love it, but it basically is a phrase bank, and I will link to it in the show notes, that allows you to get in writing the academic moves you need to make. So if you want to talk about the implications of a project, you can go to that section in the phrase bank and find the language to do that and work in some of those sentences. A lot of times, work that needs to be done on a dissertation, it gets down to the sentence level where you're not being clear enough or you're not explaining well enough. Using those markers in that academic phrase bank can tip off your readers that you do know how to make those academic writing moves. And one of the major signs to me that a dissertation isn't ready is that those markers aren't in there because you haven't carried your reader through a scholarly argument in a way that they're expecting to go, which is where maybe some of the uncertainty comes from. So that would be something I'd recommend doing, making a master list of what it is you have to do down to nitpicky details. And I mentioned episode 46, which is our podcast on using an Asana project management board to manage a big revision. I have screenshots. I show you how I use it for mine. I like Asana for this kind of work primarily because you can use a free version. You don't have to pay for any upgrades or anything like that. And no, they're not a sponsor. We don't have any sponsors on this podcast. But I like that one just because it keeps it all in one spot and I can check it off in an easy way. I also can update items on the list and move things around. And I just like it. Or any other kind of similar tool like that would be useful at this point rather than keeping a handwritten list where you have lots of crossouts. But at this point, whatever way you can kind of manage it, you just need a place to know where all the tasks are that you still have left to do, because now you're at the point where you don't have time to hunt for them. So we want to avoid having that. Another thing that I would recommend doing at this point is to make a motto or a mantra, and you can write this on a Post-it or anything like that, that says, fix only what needs to be fixed. Let me say that again. Fix only what needs to be fixed. And here's the thing. Sometimes students, when they get in the final couple weeks of a dissertation right before a defense, they start messing with things that were okay before. Maybe they weren't wonderful. Maybe on a scale of like A through F, they were like C+ pieces, but they're okay. They're not pieces your dissertation advisor has either commented about as a major emergency, they've already passed scrutiny and they're fine. They're not great, but they're fine. This is a common for dissertation students to find, say, in the middle of the literature review chapter that, oh, there's this other source I really should have gotten in there, or I don't like how this paragraph is written. Leave it. Fix only what needs to be fixed. Go after the things that your dissertation chair or thesis chair has said, these are the deal breakers. If you don't do them, you can't defend. Those are way more important at this time. At the same time, if you find some minor things as you go that you can fix quickly, an emphasis on quickly. So for example, maybe a space is messed up. Maybe you've consistently spelled a last name and a source wrong, and you could go into your Microsoft Word document and do a find and replace. So find the word and replace it with the correct spelling. Okay, those are all right to tackle. All of those kinds of tinier things that you discover, if you can't tackle them in a minute or less, don't bother with them. So again, fix only what needs, an emphasis on needs to be fixed. And then finally, something that I have found is very, very helpful for the graduate students that I direct is to make slides for their defense. We do an hour-long defense in front of a committee. Make the slides for those defense a few weeks ahead of time, because this forces you to pull out the most important pieces of your project to talk about. And one of the nice things about slides is that they have to come in some kind of an order. So this is a way where you can figure out if your logic makes sense. You might be able to catch some things that you haven't caught before when you have to distill your project down into 15 minutes, but it's a good exercise. So I would encourage you at this point, if you have not done this already, open up a deck for your slide defense. Even if you're 9 months out, even if you're, a year out or even a year and a half out, start a slide deck and put in some of the important points that need to be in there. So usually this means you have to have some kind of a background on your project, What are your research questions? How was what was your methodology? What were your findings? What are the implications? A lot of programs ask for what was the impact on the discipline. We do. We say, well, why does this project matter in our discipline of writing studies? So making those slides can be another useful tool, and it also can be a nice break. Last week, we talked about carving up your days into basically getting double duty out of each day. So on Monday, have 2 different writing sessions, maybe one in the morning and one in the afternoon, or on Tuesday, have one in the morning and in the evening. Thinking about making slides can be a good way to give your brain a break. If you can't go any farther, you can go hop into those slides for a little while, maybe work on those for a half hour and then come back to the actual writing that you're working on. Hopefully these strategies help. Next week, I will offer some more strategies for actually working on some of the writing and getting into some of the thorny problems and solutions. So check out that episode. And then finally, I mentioned in the previous episode that we are offering a special for dissertation students and anyone else who wants to do a final push on their academic projects before the end of the semester. If you purchase 4 coaching hours, you can get a 5th coaching hour free. So if you're listening to this this would be end of March, early April of 2022, come back to me for that special if you're interested. It's just for podcast listeners and some of our clients. I'm at Christine, Christine, @defendandpublish.com. Happy writing this week.